Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for Chai with Viji. I'm really excited about today. And don't forget, every first Sunday of the month, I have this Chai with Viji community gathering where we will talk about various subjects that'll be important and relevant in our lives. And hopefully, we can learn a lot and join together in community, ask questions, learn, and support one another. So, this is going to be a powerful chai because a lot of folks after the last one had contacted me and shared how the information that we discussed last time really impacted them strongly. And that is because what we talked about is so relevant in our lives. Relationships that we have, relationships that we form, relationships that we create are very important to us because it is how we experience life. And when we understand how they came into being and we understand how to navigate sometimes difficult waters, then we have the power to really change how we experience those relationships, especially the ones that, sometimes cause us pain, sometimes cause us worry, and sometimes cause us sadness. So without further ado, let's start. So today we are going to talk about what I call the alchemy of agency. And this is important because we want to begin to understand how we can transform inherited patterns that we have in relationships through conscious choice into making them something that we can learn from and enjoy. There's a large context for all of this, and I want to go through these slides, this presentation today, this conversation today very slowly. I will stop after each slide so that we can just really soak it all in and discuss. Last time we understood the karma that we come into, and I'm going to actually review a bit because these are really heavy topics. Now, what are we going to do with that karma that we recognize? That's what we're going to talk about today. For those of you who didn't attend last month's chai, we are born because of karma, the idea of karma. And karma is the phenomena that creates the experiences that we have. It's what I would say is the soil for the field and the experiences that we have in this life. And it creates certain circumstances, certain events that happen in our life so that we can experience certain things. And that gives us an experience from which we can learn from, we can understand. Are there any thoughts about this concept? Because on some level, many people react to this idea as if they don't have any control over it. So, this is an idea that something just happens to us and we just have to experience it. And I think that there was a lot of internal pushback for a lot of people last time because they asked a lot of questions about, well, what can we do now if this is set? Then how do we respond to this? So, if karma is the soil that we are born into and give our life circumstances, it then determines how we enter that field. So last time what we did is we talked about how ancestry was part of that, how our parents were part of that equation, as well as the environment in the womb. And so the idea of last time's talk was very clearly to understand that what we do before and during entering a phase of creation, right, is very, very important because it really does set the tone for how those relationships and how that creation comes into being. And this is why agency over that time, impact of what we do during that time is so important. Why emphasis of what we think, what we eat, how our bodies are, and what we experience during that time is something that we really need to pay attention to. In Jyotisha, right? This is not just an idea. So, in Ayurveda, we emphasize what to do before entering a circumstance. But in Jyotisha, it reveals what we did and what are the circumstances that we are born into. And so, in that way, the ancestry is shown through a particular chart, D12, we discussed last time, and that really reflects what comes through the lineage, generations before us. So, not just our parents, but who came before them. And then we also discussed how so very important and the impact of the environment in the womb is to the child that's born, because that discusses how relationships are experienced, how we feel the interactions and the experiences that we have in life. And that is determined in the womb. And then, of course, it is through our parents that we are born, and how all of not only lineage, but also how we experience the womb is embodied. This is the environment that's set before birth. And it's important to understand that this setting creates that field. So it creates that environment for which the experiences that we're going to have come to be. And that's how karma fulfills itself. Any thoughts on this?
Sorry, I think my video was a little chopped. Would D12, D7, I understand. What's the embodiment?
Oh, that it's just of the parents and what they bring to the table, how their health is, how their relationship is, how their mindset is, right? So there are many layers to our existence. And I wanted to bring about a understanding of how what we do prior to a event of creation, and obviously like the one of the most important one is the creation of life, how that impacts everything that comes afterwards. So I'm emphasizing that it's so important that we pay attention to what we do and how we feel and all of that. But one aspect of that is relationships, one that we inherit as a structure, as a lineage, as a generational impetus, if you will, from ancestry, which in Jyotish is shown through a particular chart called D12. And then on the other side, the womb environment, how in our mother's womb, what she experiences outside as well as inside, what she feels impacts how we then experience relationships in our life. And the fact that it's not necessarily a chart, but that embodiment, our own coming into being, our bodies, our physical makeup is through our parents.
Okay, understood. I just one follow up.
Yes.
I see, yeah, of course, the D7 has some relation with the mother, but um, does D12 or the ancestry have to have, for me, have had to had any relationship with my parents, or it's completely
Well, of course. So,
distinct?
so, so there's a line, right? So there's a line that connects you to all of your ancestors and all of the generations before. So last time we talked about how we are not downloading all of that karma, all of those patterns on our shoulders, but we take a portion of it. So
Okay,
absolutely,
okay.
they are all connected.
Okay, okay, got it.
So the reason how this ancestry and womb environment come through the parents is because they set a field, whoever those parents are. This is talking about whatever creation, but yes, our parents create a field through which a portion of whatever we are supposed to experience with relation to ancestry, as well as what we are supposed to experience in terms of relational feelings, relational interactions with others, including our parents and otherwise, how they are determines that
Oh,
experience, both
okay, thank you.
ancestral experience as well as womb experience. And I'll go into it a little bit more, but does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for those who may not
Yeah,
have been here before? Yes.
yeah. So what exactly is our goal from learning about the D12 and D7 charts, right?
Yes.
So because I mean, we cannot change it. So we are trying to change our perspective of it.
Well, thank you
That's
for asking. That's the entire point of today. So there's two parts of really exploring these topics. The first reason is that we want to understand that it's not just random what we do, that what we do has an impact. So that's the first thing. But yes, now that we are born and we understand, or that we see, what our ancestral inheritance might be, and how we may then react, or how we may feel certain interactions, the point is that the way that we live our life, the way that we interact with people, the relational experiences that we have with our family, our parents, our children, is really what determines the flavor of our life in general, right? So many people come to me because of trauma that they have felt or that they carry from their families, from their parents, or even just trauma that they don't even realize that they're carrying from generations before their parents. So many people come to me saying that they have had interactions with their families, their parents, their children, that have either upset them or bothered them, right? And so it impacts the way that we live our life. So that's why this is actually quite important, because when we understand twofold, we can't change it in terms of the experiences that we may have, but we can change our experience of those circumstances. And that's the point of today's talk.
Okay.
So there is a nuance. We won't be able to change the fact. Oftentimes I talked about, if it's raining outside, we're not going to be able to change the fact that it is raining. But we can in fact exchange our experience of either getting wet or slipping or things like that, depending upon what we do. And so that is what I wanted to discuss today. But I want to make sure that we understand the foundation first.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Viji.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Oftentimes we repeat generational behavior, we experience emotions and feelings that our ancestors have or had, or how they treated us, or how our interactions with them impacts what we feel. So this is actually extremely important, because if you experience something and it either hurts you, gets you mad, makes you feel anxious or sad, then when you go into your next relationship, or you meet somebody at work, or you talk to your friend, or you talk to a family member, that's going to impact how we respond. And how we respond then is how we live our life and how we experience our life. So that's why this is so very important to understand. But the first thing we need to understand is where it came from. And then we need to understand that there was a purpose for it, right? Because oftentimes we just feel that someone is trying to hurt us, or that we are hurt, or that it is right, or that it is wrong, that we are going through this, or that a certain person did something to us. So it's important to understand then that each one of us has these charts, has these aspects that we have inherited, has feelings on how we experience those inherited events. And when we understand that, then we can take a step back and change the way our interactions with people around us are, because we no longer respond from a place of, oh, this is happening to me, but rather from a place of understanding. So we will go deeper. These are great questions. Any others before I move on?
Yeah, I have a follow-up.
Yes,
So, so we cannot change the karma that we inherited or brought into this life, but if we change our perspective of it and how we experience it, does that mean that we are impacting the karma that we pass on to the next generation? Is that the idea?
absolutely. And it is not just that, but it is also that we can. So, karma, if you think about it, is not about good or bad. It is about the lessons that we need to learn, things that we need to rectify from, the past. And so it is actually possible to change karma. But how do we change karma? By only learning those lessons. So yes, it is possible. So we cannot change the fact that we inherited this karma. Then, and we will meet certain circumstances because of that inheritance. But if we respond differently, then we do in fact change not the event itself, but we change how we experience that event. So we can go from experiencing it as something that's absolutely impacting us, that's preventing us from doing things in our life, or making us feel a certain way, to when we respond differently to that, the impact over time, because of course life is about things happening over and over again until we learn that lesson, so that when we do, and we do behave differently, then the lesson shows up different. We feel it differently. So we no longer have that same impact on us. And so, absolutely, we can not only change what our experience is, but then future generations. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right. So, this is a blueprint from an old lineage, right? And so, last time we talked about how these lessons are inherited from the lineage. And so, it's almost like a expectation that is brought down from ancestral history. So it's like a script, right? And as an actor in that script, depending upon how we react, we may then experience that script differently. So last time we talked about 4 different ancestral scripts. These are described through different mythological characters based on the fact that their stories represent how these scripts play out in life. So, Yama, that ancestral script was about truth, responsibility, accountability. Then we have Ashwini Kumaras, which is about restoration and intervention. Ganesha, which is about the removal of obstacles, integration, fixing what was fragmented, as well as Ahisarpa. And this is about intensity, entanglement, depth. So today, what we're going to go into, because last time we talked a little bit about what these pillars, what these ancestral scripts mean. The idea again is really what Pooja said in her question, which is that I want you to understand that this sub layer, substratum of our lives exist, and when we begin to understand it, then our experiences change. However, Jyotish is so deep. So the intricacy of all of this is many, many, many fold. It's very layered, very depthful. So we will not be able to learn it all in 1 hour. But you can use this understanding, because you don't need to even know what the names are. When you interact with people, when you interact with family members, when you have experiences in your life, you don't need a reference guide to be able to tell you what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. But if, for example, you did connect it to, or you thought about, maybe there is a deeper lesson here to learn, and what is it? And you explored that further, that is the beginning of you then being able to transform your experience. I'm only giving names, structures to what we all would be experiencing. And these are 4, scripts that have a lot of depth. So they're not black and white. There will be various experiences that come with each one of these scripts. Any questions though on this? Okay.
Hi, Viji. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a quick
Yes.
one, Lynn.
Yes.
My introduction to Ayurveda in this aspect is brand new today, so I'll be honest.
Yes.
But I am curious how these charts, who writes these charts for us? Who does these charts for us?
Wonderful. So last time we talked about how the moment that you're born, based on the alignment of the planets, there is a chart that is drawn. And basically, so there's a time of birth, there's a place of birth, and date of birth. And these 3 determine a particular configuration in the sky, which then creates a chart. And so that D12 and D7 exists, and it shows these aspects of our life.
Thank you.
So everyone has a chart based on your birth, and everyone has these aspects. So when you look deeper, and of course we can do that for you, when we look deeper, you will understand then what that message is for you, what that ancestral, history that you have inherited is, and also the emotional ways in which you may experience them, so that there's a greater clarity and understanding in the experiences that you have, because you're like, oh wow, yes, you will be able to relate to it. Now, there have been people who have written to me when they have seen what their, for example, D12 chart shows, what their D7 chart shows. Well, this doesn't match, that doesn't match. Well, you have to understand that it's not just one, two, three words for this type of ancestral lineage. It's not just one, two words for this type of ancestral lineage. There's a depth to it. And so we often don't necessarily have to experience, for example, an idea of restoration, of healing the family line. We may need to create experiences in our own life to heal things that happen to us. So then you can start to see that there are nuances to this. Anything psychological it cannot be taken at surface level. And I know that all of you, that every time I bring up these topics, there is great interest because we want to understand ourselves better. That's going to take time. So again, what I would lead all of us to do is to just go inward and recognize what we experience. And from there, the idea, even if you walk away from today with only one thing, how can I experience the relationships in my life differently, because they may be trying to teach me something. They may be trying to push me into a greater level of understanding of not only myself, but the people and the circumstances around me. And the idea why I bring it up at all is because you see how much impact it has on our lives. The idea is that when we all arrive at a place of creation, that we keep in mind that what we do, what we feel, what we eat, all of the things that are around us do have an impact on not only our lives, but the lives that we create. So the second aspect of this, right, is how our mind then feels and processes that script. It's like the filter, as I mentioned last time, of the experience that we have. Because many people can have the same experience, but it doesn't mean that they feel the same way as a result of that experience. And last time we talked about how two siblings born from the same parents may have different experiences of those parents. Why is that? Right? Well, of course, they're born differently. They have a different chart. And so their D7, their D12 look different. And so this actually does explain why we all experience potentially the same circumstances differently. So, we talked about the different flavors and what they are, and how we then experience different things in our life through these different flavors of feelings of approach. Lynn, I will go into it a little bit more, but you can watch the previous Chai with Viji, and that will go over what each one of these are. But these flavors are substances, and they represent different ways in which we process what we experience, the different ways we feel and process what we experience. So based on what qualities do these substances have, that's how we approach what we experience, or it is what is called of us to, as an approach to what we experience.
I'd like to throw in just a very quick, if you don't mind.
I don't.
So you know my history very well, but for the others, I was actually adopted, and I've since I've grown up and started looking, I found everyone who from my birth family. There are 7 children from one mother. And when I found this family, interestingly enough, we never knew each other. For me, it was 60 years. I'd never known these people. But there were 4 women in this group of sisters who actually are carers. I mean, that when you think about, the chances of that, where did
Right.
that come from? It came from Ancestry. So interesting, Viji. Thank
It's
you.
so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And learning about this, I think, like you said, we all go through different circumstances. Some of us had to leave our parents at birth. Some of us had to leave our parents after birth, right? So in our Vedic sciences, we always kind of default, to karma for the reasons why we experience certain things. So the past cannot be changed, but then how we respond to that does. And yeah, thanks for sharing, Lynn. I mean, I think that's very important. This doesn't preclude children of the same parents not from inheriting certain similar ancestral traits, but it also explains that as well as why they may not as well. Okay, so here's the crux of kind of from what we have learned thus far, right? That before birth, the field is already formed. So the conditions that we're born through, right, are already formed, and that's based on what I had shared earlier, the ancestry, the parents, and the environment in the womb. Now, it is at birth, right, where these conditions then manifest, and that's seen through the chart. Now, last time I talked about three different ways in which we can approach it, or rather understand it. And this is important because, as I mentioned to Lynn, when we are born at birth, there is a particular orientation of the planets, which is yet another prism through which this field is experienced. So each planet that's in the sky represents a different way in which we can have an experience unfold. This is what creates the layers of experience that we have, because we don't just have one experience with one person, right? And we don't just have one experience, in general. There are many different experiences and they're layered. They're not clear cut. They're messy. That's why life is messy. And so how life is experienced then is shown through these internal layers. And this is what is shown also through what I just mentioned, the D7 and D12. So last time I talked about three different ways. One is your ascendant. And again, although it's so tempting, right, to go into this, these are just components of the chart, but it's more important what you get out of it, what you understand that the chart actually shows, irrespective of whether you understand the components. So the ascendant or the lagna gives how you see things, how you experience things. The sun illuminates your own inner truth. And then the moon is related to your emotional home. So now, the reason why I don't want to go so much in depth, because definitely last time, and a lot of people had contacted me about how, for example, the sun in our chart, yes, has a reference to father, right? And so it's not always going to indicate that your father behaves in a certain way. No, it may be how you experience your father, or it may be how you can, what is being called of you in your experience with your father. This is where it will get confusing to you if you try to understand the chart, but the entire essence of this is that it came from the field that was created, right, before. Birth is what manifested what you experience, and there are multiple layers of that experience. And we will get to how you can change it. But this is, and for those of you who are going to ask me, but there are so many other planets, Viji, I will get to that in a second. We have one life, right? And remember that we're going to have multiple perspectives on that, from very some from our intellect, some from our emotions, some from our physical body. And so this is why we actually have that layered experience, because of these overlays of the multiple layers indicated by our chart, and in this case, the planets that are there in the sky and in a particular orientation, the exact moment you were born. But this is how and why our experience is so intricate. And it gets even more intricate. I'm not going to stay more than a few seconds on this screen. But these are 7 planets and 2 nodes. But you can see here that there are multiple ways. So, for example, the planet Mercury shows us how intellectually we approach. Mars talks about how we create boundaries. What is our drive to do things? What is the motivation? The sun, what is being asked of you? And yes, that does come from a paternal lineage. But I just want you to understand that there is so much that comes about, so many layers that we can see. Oftentimes people are like, read my chart, tell me everything about me. As you can see, just one of these filters, one of these prisms, one of these lenses can take, so long to be able to explain or describe. But again, I'm going to go back to the next thing. None of these matter more than your own experience. So how does then this impact? So we have this ancestral side that comes in. We have how we approach things. And then you can see now, right, that there are many ways in which we can experience it. So someone might have a yama. So, for example, if our parents were very strict, very structured, wanted us to follow rules, or had particular ways in which they wanted us to do things, if I am a child and I experience it through this flavor, kshira, I might be so happy that my parents are giving me boundaries, that they're setting me up, with a really, really wonderful infrastructure. Whereas if I looked at it differently from kshara, I might experience it as, what are you doing? You're being extremely strict with me. You're not recognizing how I want to do things, how I want to approach things, what my feelings are. So you can see that one experience can be felt in so many different ways. We know that as human beings. I don't need to show you this graphic, for you to know that. But then you can see how it can literally be mapped out. Oftentimes, as individuals, I meet with so many people that we don't actually recognize these things. We may not always recognize how we respond, right? Because sometimes, sometimes we're even not connected to how we feel. We just respond like this very instinctual guttural response. For those of us who are that way, or for those of us who want to go deeper into that experience, this is one way in which we can. Are there any questions about this graphic?
I have one clarification. I think
Yes.
so. In the last times, Chai, you talked about each D7, each 12, and then within each D7, D12, each planet or node would be associated with one
Very good. Yes,
rasa,
that's correct.
one devata, right?
Yes, very correct.
Now, but I mean, I was able to understand when you said, okay, if this particular, let's say the ascendant has a certain rasa or has a certain devata, how that is um how that reflects in the relationship, let's say. But how do the matrix itself, how do these two have, how are the devatas and rasas, how are they defining anything?
Yes.
I don't know how
So
to explain my question, but
no, no,
I'm
no.
able to understand the dependency of the each ascendant or moon or sun on the rasa separately, on the devata separately. But the matrix itself, how are they coming together? I think I don't
Yes.
understand.
So imagine that this matrix exists for each planet, right? So again, I actually answered your question before you asked it. So, but it's a fantastic question, and it begs for it to be repeated. So essentially, then this is a ancestral which has been passed down, right? So each one of these, and this does not in and of itself define an experience. This gives you kind of like the high level of what the experience is meant for you to learn from, is meant to be, is meant to provide. And then these are the emotional feelings that how we experience that. Just like I explained, you have two children and you can say the exact same thing to both of those children. One child might experience it as you are scolding them. Another child might experience it that you are helping them, that you are guiding them. And that's absolutely true. So that is what, let's say, I have shown on this slide, right? That there can be any combination. So when a parent behaves, the lineage, just the family, dynamics are a certain way, whether it's Yama, Ashwini, Ganesha, or Ahisarpa, each each of us can experience that in a different way. Now you bring the question about, well, how do the different planets come in? Well, let's say, for example, my mind intellectually understands that yes, my mother is, being strict with me and she's guiding me, and so that's a favorable one. But my emotions, my feelings, which is different than my intellect and different in my mind and the way that I perceive things, might take it as, well, wait a minute, she's insulting me and I'm feeling hurt. And so that is how we can explain that how our lives are nuanced. Why do we have certain experiences where we're pulled in different directions? A part of us feels one way, the other part feels the other way. This is why that is the case. Because we are not just, and that goes to the previous slide, we're not just we're not just, for example, what I said, our mind, or rather our intellect and our emotions. We are so many different things. And it's those different things and how we are built, right? And how we are wired that gives us the experience that we have. Does that make better sense?
Yeah, I think it's super complicated, but I
It's
guess
super
slowly,
complicated.
yeah.
Yeah, it's super complicated. So it's super complicated, and there's this, and that's why I know that so many people just want to get to the bottom of this. They want to know, they want to interpret. Yes, and I think that's great because I wanted to at least instill this fire of realizing how beautifully divine, how beautifully in depth, how beautifully intricate we are. At the same time, also, share that there is a beautiful map of all this that when we do learn about it, not in an hour, but when we do go in depth and understand, then again, we have agency. So let's move on so that we, can get to that. But like I mentioned here, each one of these combinations creates a unique lived experience. And say they don't have the conflict arises when they don't have to all be in synergy or work with each other. Okay, so this is where you guys probably want to be, right? And this in and of itself as well is not the be all end all because we cannot define a life experience fully by one sentence. However, when you look at this slide, these are all the devatas from D12, the ancestral lineage, and are what we are inheriting. And so you can see how here there are various lessons that we can take out of this. So, for example, with Yama relating to truth and responsibility, it's not just about the fact that we have to be truthful or we have to be responsible. We may not. We may be in circumstances where we're pushed to not be truthful or not be responsible. Or maybe we are wired in such a way that we don't want to be truthful or responsible, right? And so so there are many lessons that come from that. And it is an amalgamation of all of those parts. And like Divya said, it is complicated, which is why you need an interpreter, right? This is why studying Jyotish is not just 1 year. It takes, a lifetime to learn. But if you look at these lessons, so for example, truth and responsibility, where a lesson could be building internal boundaries for ourselves and creating a sense of understanding where there wasn't before, is one of the lessons that we can take away from an ancestral lineage that is about and around truth and responsibility, right? And so in some circumstances, it's about experiencing that from any direction, whether it be at work, whether it be with our kids, whether it be with our spouse, whether it be with our parents, or whether it be with our friends. There are many ways in which these lessons can be experienced. And so when you understand that, then is when you can look at the circumstance differently. So there are various, right? And so the way that you can begin to understand, like last time, these different devatas have mythological stories, and those stories shared the life experience of of those people. And from there comes a lesson based on what they experience that will mirror, and you will see this in your own life when you understand it, that will mirror either the experience that you have or one that you have to cultivate so that you build that experience, or lessons around that experience itself where you may, for example, if you have Ashwini, you may be part of a circumstance where it's important for you to restore balance and heal family disputes, family breakages, etc. Now, the hard part of this is that oftentimes we look at lessons outside of ourselves. This is not something I did. I don't deserve this. I don't know why this is happening. It's difficult for me to, for example, maintain boundaries when there are none, or I feel guilty when I maintain boundaries or when I put up boundaries. These are the lessons that we are meant to learn, and they're not always easy. So now from the D7, there are also lessons, right? And I will share with you what these lessons are, and then we'll quickly kind of go through it. So last time I talked about how these different substances, right, and how they're made are important in understanding how we experience. For example, dadi or yogurt. We know how that's made. We take milk, we have to boil it, then we have to, seed it with something, and then we allow that process to unfold where it gets harder and harder or more solidified to finally become yogurt. So part of that, our lesson, if we experience something that requires a little bit of effort, right, is that we need to trust the process, right? And so that some of the things that are maybe that there is something going on underneath the surface that needs to be allowed to happen so that we can have that inner growth, so that we can have transformation, so that we can see change. And then we can finally see the fruits of our labors, which is the yogurt. So this is the way. It's very, very depthful. It's very deep, but that's human life. So these are the various, ways. And again, today's talk is not necessarily about the fact that these are the exact lessons, but when we do know them, take a screenshot, read up on them more, understand, kind of compare and contrast your own life, what you experience, what's in your chart. And again, you won't be able to interpret it, but the basics of what Divya and Pooja talked about, and I can provide those to you when you see, oh, okay, these are the combinations. How do I experience this in my life? How can I respond differently? But that's where we're going. Does anyone have a question on those two slides, the lessons? So the idea, right, is that all of these lessons that we're learning through our ancestry is filtered and experienced differently through the flavors, and that's what gives our life experience. So that's important. And so then the question becomes, how do you meet it differently? Meaning the exact same thing that I shared in the question I gave in the earlier one, which is if I experience my parent, for example, in a certain way, and I immediately respond in a certain way. Is there a lesson for me to learn in that so that I don't respond in a way where I am upset or taking it in a way that a person is trying to hurt me or control me or any combination? Can I meet it differently? And then the question is, will you meet it differently? Because I often find that these two are the hardest, obviously, the hardest things to do. There's a lot of resistance on the part of people, right? But when these are done, is how you can transform. And so the truth is that this is the foundation of the work that I do with people. It's the work that I have done with myself, so that we go from a place of all of what we experience is happening to me and I'm really upset about it. This person did this to me. How could they treat me this way? How could I be in a family that's like this? To really, what is this showing me? And I can learn from this. I can choose to understand it. And the most important is that I can choose my response. So the idea, right? And I think it was Pooja that asked, like, why are we even talking about this? Because yes, we cannot change the pattern you're in. However, it is possible that, you can change how you meet it, which then I believe that you can then transform how you experience it. So from before, it's understanding that karma, it's embracing the lesson, and then choosing the response. And I think that this is really, really the hardest part. But for me, personally, as a personal experience, learning this, which is this, understanding it, right? And then saying, okay, yeah, well, maybe this might be correct. Choosing a different response has absolutely transformed so many of the circumstances, because nobody is excused from, nobody, escapes the lessons that we have to learn. Any thoughts? And it can be that, hey, this just doesn't make sense. I don't believe it. I'm just curious.
Would you just go over a little bit about karma?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great question, Lynn, because that is the foundation that all of this rests on. So if that part is a little bit unclear, so let me see whether I have a slide that I made of karma before, and I have. So Lynn, the idea is that when we are born, or even before we're born, so as a soul, there is the idea that the word karma means action. And so based on the actions that we have done, and the idea is that our soul is eternal. And so our soul carries the actions of previous lifetimes. There is a pot of karma that we are meant to experience. And from that pot, when we are born, the idea is that we take a small portion of that pot and we bring that into our lives. And this right here, when we are born, that small portion of this big pot is what we are meant to experience in our life. That means that if there are certain lessons that we need to learn, then we will experience certain circumstances that allow us to learn that lesson. And then from there, this type of karma, so these are Sanskrit words that give a meaning to what these different karmas are. So this is prarabdha, means a portion of the total karma that we have attached, to us. Then when we are living, we do actions. So we might do things that incur more lessons. And there may be things that we do, to not incur more lessons, that we're like, okay, I learned that lesson. My total amount is lessened. But what we do in this life also builds and adds karma. And so then we talk about the kind of the total karma, that what we've brought in, what we create, and then this is what we bring over, into future circumstances. That's a little bit of a background. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, total. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. I think someone else had a question.
I didn't, hi Viji.
Hi.
I didn't have a question, I just had a comment. I
Yes.
just had this realization of like your whole process and explaining everything. I was like, this is yoga.
Yes.
What yoga truly is. And I just had this clarity of we've been working together for so many years, and I feel like everything, like the picture is finally coming together for me.
Mm.
And my like my son, my inner truth is Dadi, is like that
Hmm.
yogurt. And like
Yes.
when you said trusting the process and it takes time, I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. Like we all want it to happen overnight. And sometimes yogurt does happen overnight, but sometimes it doesn't. The temperature may not be right. And I think so it's in understanding this that also gives us the feeling of it's not about self-blame. Again, when we have understanding, then we don't use words like, or we don't think about right and wrong necessarily, or is it my fault? Like whose fault is it? It's not about fault. It's about understanding, right? And it's not about another conversation I had with someone which was brilliant was about, oh, it's 50% my fault and 50% their fault, or 50%, my onus to do something. Well, actually, that's not true because your life is your life, right? And so we need to take 100% accountability for ourselves. Now, nobody has to do any of this. This is, a synthesis that I have thought about very deeply. And like you said, Kyla, how I, structure the work that I do. But when you do look at it this way and you do begin to understand, again, like you said, without understanding who we are, we cannot create change. We cannot create growth. So that's what this is all about. What are the tools that we have available to us? How can we use it to create a better life experience, better health, just a fabulous life? And oftentimes it is perspective. But in this case, it's perspective based on, in many ways, fact, right? Um, and so, yes, so I'd like to go to, again, what I call the alchemy of agency. And that is because alchemy is what? Turning one thing into another. And we absolutely have the power to do it. And how does that happen? Through agency. That means we make the decision. So if we don't make the decision, then alchemy cannot happen, right? And so this four-step process, number one, recognize, see the pattern, so that we don't need any chart for that, right? We can now, even if I had coalesced, which I can't, but if I coalesce there are seven flavors of how we feel things, and there are, four of these ancestral lineages. And interestingly enough, they do encompass all of human experience, but I'm not able to share every single aspect. I never will be able to, but in all of those four lineages. But we have our own experience, and so we can begin to start to be like, oh yeah, I'm having a really tough time, with my sister, with my mom, with my dad, with my friends, with my coworkers, whatever it may be. Understand and recognize the pattern. Again, not blame. Second, reframe it, right? Because this is showing you something. And then when you reframe it, you may be able to then start to ask yourself, well, okay, how can I behave differently, or what lesson am I here to learn? What can I get out of this? What is being asked of me? And then finally, how we respond, right? And so rather than responding, like I said, from that guttural, just immediate gut instinct perspective, we can really make a conscious choice. And when we make conscious choice repeatedly, guess what? That's what becomes then our gut instinct. So we can transform. And so if we go through each one of these in detail, right? So we ask ourselves, well, this pattern seems to be repeating how I experience things. And it's not just with my parent, it is with somebody else as well. So this is where journaling is so very important, because it does help us to recognize, what does it feel like? Where have I seen this before? Because like I've always shared, if we don't know, or we don't see, then we can't do much with it. So this is just very important. And we may recognize by looking in the mirror, oftentimes I show that mirror, but we may also recognize when someone else is holding that mirror to us. Doesn't have to be a coach, doesn't have to be a practitioner. It could be your friend, it could be your journal, but this is just so important. Then again, what we have to understand, right, is that we're not victims. So it's not random that these things are happening. There is a reason. And there is truth to everything happens for a reason. Doesn't mean that I'm saying that it feels good, but there is a reason. And so we move from this feeling and this perspective of this is, happening to me and me, but rather, what is this showing me? And when you shift that perspective and you reframe it, you can see it differently. And eventually, I promise you, you will feel it differently. So that goes back to Pooja's question. So this next part, what is it asking of me? So we always think like I have to be a certain way or do a certain thing. So we have to understand, again, even with this, there are nuances to this. The response or the revelation that happens to us, it could be that, or the response that it's asking from us could be, is it asking for me to recognize something within myself? Do I need to respond? Do I need to understand and keep quiet? Or is it just that, I need to have this sense of awareness? So that's so every one of those architectural ancestral patterns carries a demand from us, carries something that it asks of us. And so a lifetime is really spent to understand what those are. And then finally, in terms of our response itself, what are we going to do to meet this, right? So, and when I mention here, what would alignment look like? Is it alignment with like that immediate feeling that we have before we kind of check it? Or is it in alignment with what we are here to learn from that experience, right? So is it a response that I'm just giving because this is how I'm wired? And by the way, all those flavors is how you're wired, right? So we are wired in a certain way. We all kind of criticize, jokingly or otherwise, oh, you're like this. But why do we do that? So we are wired in a certain way. We all are. But my I guess challenge to all of us is understanding why we're wired in that way and why we immediately respond in a certain way that may not be the best for us. We have the power to change it. So when we understand it, we can slowly then consciously respond rather than respond from that wired place, right? And so, again, agency does begin with how you meet the moment, every opportunity that you have. And so, when you do meet it differently, even though the same pattern arises and the same relationship may remain, you recognize it, you understand what's being asked of you, and you respond differently. And that's the power. Because again, so it's not the circumstance or the event that will change, but everything about how you meet it eventually can and will change. And then this is where transformation begins. I have done this with so many clients, and you will not believe that, you see, when someone walks in a room and they're in a bad mood, and you were in a good mood before they entered the room, how easy is it for their mood to poison the atmosphere? It's very easy. Likewise, even a different way of us responding, of us being, can change the room. And so I've had so many circumstances where when you create this shift, this alchemy, and exercise your agency, then that very vibration changes the way that others also interact with you. And so next chai, we will go in a little bit deeper, right? So again, today we created an understanding of how to how to look at what we experience. And so it's integrating this, which is the absolute hardest, which most people spend a lifetime. And so next session rather, we will talk about how these patterns show up in real time, how and what we can do to stay aware. And Kyla mentioned this beautifully, yoga, the practice of yoga, not just asana, but what happens in each one of those poses and beyond the poses, of the practice of yoga, and then how transformation then unfolds over time. I alluded to that. This is very important, but yes, again, this is where the transformation begins. And so thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this phrase stays with you. You may not choose the pattern, but you always can choose how you meet it. And with that, I wanted to thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with me. And I hope you will all join me in next chai. If you have any topics that you would like to discuss, I would be happy to entertain them. And if you guys are interested as well, I have began to write a series of books called The Journey. The first one is entitled Your Soul's Journey, which talks a lot about karma and the entry of our soul into this world and our birth. And then the next book is called Your Mind's Journey, which talks about all of the different experiences that we can have. And then the third book, Your Body's Journey, is a lot about what we spoke about today and all of the things that led up to the moment that we were born. So thanks again. And I would be happy to answer any questions or have a discussion.
Okay, I'll go first if you don't mind.
Of
No,
course.
fantastic. I think it's just fascinating. I think like even the last chai, I was not there, but listening to the video was just it's just mind blowing. What is happening? What is going on? The two questions I have. One is I know you talked about your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your children. Is there something that talks about your other relations? I know you briefly mentioned, you can have relationships. I mean, you can have a certain pattern with your friends, your siblings, your spouses. Is there something that talks about that, or
All
those
of
are
them.
separate charts? Oh,
Oh, yes, they're all separate charts. So this is why Jyotish is so it's mind-blowing, it's confusing, but it's absolutely amazing. Every aspect of life is discussed and aspects of life that you probably have never thought about. All of these are there. And so again, Divya, I would say it takes a lifetime to learn
yeah.
and understand these, right? And it is so depthful that probably, one practitioner may or may not focus on certain aspects
Mm.
more than others. So, but for the sake of the work that I do with women's reproductive health and
Oh,
related to birth, that's why I mentioned these specific. In later books, I will talk about the other charts, actually. I plan to write about them. But yes, I mentioned these because, of course, this is related to birth. Well,
okay.
they're all related to birth, but I just mean it is a way for us to understand the importance of what we do. So I mentioned these. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
fantastic. I mean, I'm just just the D7 D12. I know it's just been this, but that itself is so confusing and overwhelming. I don't know how everything else is. The other thing that I wanted, I misunderstood what ancestry is, and I'll go back to the previous video. But I was always thinking if I'm looking at my ancestry, then it's maybe talking about my past lives. And I think someone asked this question before, but does it only mean, is it my past lives, or is it my parents lineage or their past lives, or is it all? I think that's what I was trying to understand. Have we all been together always, like do you,
Right. Oh, so you're asking lots of questions. I mean, and these are all the questions that we all have. What I would say is this. There's there's a lot. So that bucket that I showed Lynn of the first of the Sanchita Karma,
Sanchita?
which is all of that. So just imagine that pot isn't as small as that one small slide can show. It's whatever it is. I don't know how to describe it, endless or pretty deep. And so there are many many experiences that we could take into this life. So that D12 is only a portion. So there are many more connections that we have, but they are not the central focus of the theme of your life right now. Does that make sense? So that is related to you. That is related to your soul. Now, yes, because you came through your parents, there's some connection that you must have with them, whether it be for a moment, whether it be for a season, or whether it may be for a lifetime. We don't know, right? Each person's chart shares all of that, right? And all of the questions that you have, there is a connection to the maternal lineage. There is a connection to the paternal lineage. So all of that is, yes, all of that is there. But how much, is
Dependent on the chart. Yeah.
yeah, dependent upon the chart. And well, it's not just it is dependent upon the chart, but each chart reveals what that maternal lineage is, where, what came from the maternal side, what came from the paternal side. So if you go deeper, then you will, yes, then be able to address those things as well. Yes. So for example, there are many people who an astrologer may have showed. Oh, I just hear some noise in the
Oh,
background.
sorry. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's okay. The oohs and ahs were very nice. But no, there are, some people, for example, I've had this circumstance where somebody had a very, I would say, distance relationship from their brother. And when their chart was read, they were told, it would be helpful for you to have a connection. So that person had a choice on how to respond, and that person chose to say, "Hey, I don't like my brother. They haven't treated me well, so I'm not going to extend my hand, create a bridge, have a connection." And so that was a choice that that person made. But the advice given was based on the chart. And the advice given was based on the chart, even though it to that person, they were thinking, why does my health have anything to do with creating a connection with my brother? They did not, they were questioning that. It's hard to explain, right? Like it'll take hours to explain this whole thing. But that is why, so healing some of that ancestral lineage, the connections that that ancestral lineage has to your own life, whether it be your health, whether it be your mindset, whether, any part of your life is there, and that is revealed again through the chart. And so again, the idea is that it's not to be scared. It is just to understand when you're creating that all of what we do actually creates this. And then, and it's not that we have to be perfect, because that's not the actual point of this. The point is that who we are and what we do is meant to create the fields that whoever is supposed to be our creation, they want that field, because that field is what is going to give them the ability to experience the karma that they were meant to experience. But when you look at your own chart and you see, for example, certain planets in certain one of these flavors or these ancestral lineages, then if, for example, you feel a disconnect, then you need to question beyond just the black and white, meaning, like I mentioned, so do I need to respond differently? Do I need to see it differently? Do I need to do what the ancestral lineage has asked in this particular relationship or in my relationships? So we have to, start expanding how we respond. And as you question and as you learn more, then you'll be able to refine and again, then heal the relationship. Any other questions before we sign off? Okay.
Very helpful. Thank you, Viji. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn, for joining.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed last time, I think.
Yes, everything is available on YouTube. And so all of the chais are available. And so hopefully, we build. And my plan is actually to do a proper workshop because, again, the interest is there, but all of you cannot, when you don't know the foundational aspects of how to read the chart, then this very, very advanced topic, and it is advanced, by the way, this advanced topic is difficult to understand. And so my idea more is to look at it from a ideological perspective rather than for you guys being able to interpret your own charts, right? So that, you can start, and I think it's fun to kind of look at it, but yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. Have a happy Sunday, and I will see you next Chai with Viji in June.
Thanks, Viji.
Thank you,
you.
Viji.
Thank
Bye,
you,
guys.
Viji.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.